and it starts to become separate from you. Even though it has all the marks you put on it, it's more and less than what you made it. At some point you've got to cut that umbilical cord. And then moving on to the 6, we start to accept and understand the changes we have made real. And this is where I thought of science as a creative experimentation. So the scientist is actually being involved in a kind of creative process where you are pushing, pulling, tweaking, hitting with a hammer, throwing strange powders into the fire, just seeing what happens. You're experimenting, you're playing around with it, and you're learning from it. And it's because it's kind of mutually beneficial at that point. So you're learning from this process of creation, as well as the thing you're creating is being made in this way. And then 7, we wrestle with our new emotional attachments elicited by our child, no matter how prosaic. So you create something, and it's awful. You've written a book, and it's terrible. It's really abysmal. But you go, oh my God, this is amazing. Look at this beautiful poem I created. And you want to tell everyone, look, listen to this, blah, 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 blah. And they're all going, oh my God, it's the best picture I've ever heard. I would not use that for toilet paper. So, it's very easy to confuse emotion attachments with the rational process. Because, as we say, we naturally will fling out these relationships and make these bonds all over the place. And that will, cause some kind of turbulence and trickery. And we push on to the 8th. We see the embodiment of our idealistic creation with all its mundane flaws reflected back at us. So this is where, rather than considering the emotions holding sway over the intellect, we're considering the actual physical, material world getting in the way, or in some sense taking charge. I can imagine this being like maybe an artist is chipping away at a sculpture, someone is wood carving possibly, and they find a knot in the wood, or there's a flaw in the stone, and suddenly crack, something happens. So there's kind of sudden discord maybe that can arise because there's what picture we have in our head, and actually what we are working with will have some kind of different properties. So there's this necessary kind of period of attunement when you're working with a medium, or it's like if you sword fighting, you find the sword is weak and snaps when you're trying to use it. That's not good, not if you're in a fight. So there's this kind of possible discordant event happening at that point. And then 9. We're drawn into an obsession for the artistic climax as primal creative impulse takes hold. You're almost finished, the novel is almost complete, you're nearly there. Just a few more sentences, nearly there, and it's kind of, you don't want to let go, you don't want to stop. You want to finish it, you want to get that completion, that closure, and it's very tantalising, and it kind of draws you in, and it kind of keeps you going, and it's very strange periods, And then finally the 10th, we realise that creation is or as an extension of ourselves. So our identity falls beneath the blades of our intellect to be recreated. For example, someone who acts cruelly towards other people is by that act defined as a cruel person. Basically, people will judge you by your works. So you've created this work of art, you've created this thing in the world, you've done something, you've achieved something. This is reflecting on you as a person by the choices you made. And it's also kind of an extension of you. I mean, you have a feeling that when you created something, you kind of feel that attachment. You carve a work of art, you kind of feel that attachment to it. You don't want to suddenly, burn it and throw it away, unless you really, really hated it. It could happen.
There is a very interesting Ten of Swords cards that in the Anna Kay Tarot that I recently acquired, where instead of being so grim as it usually is what me and my Finnish friend labelled the fuck it card, because basically it's the same principle. So you've got the 10 swords and the blood, but in the card itself, and I'm sorry I haven't got it with me today because I bought a different deck, the man is not lying down, he's walking off. So he's saying, fuck it.
What, all the swords are in the ground?
All the swords are in the ground, his blood is left there, but he's walking off, 8 of Cups style, he's just walking off into the sunset, saying, you know what, it's gone, done, over and done. So you've created this, you've gone through that process, and you've got the choice, again, to do what you wish with that, I think. Unfortunately, a lot of the decks, I think, portray the 10 as very grim stuff, in a sense, but that particular one struck my attention because of what you're saying. You know, you get to the point of creation and you're there and you're at the end, and if people judge you, then it's your choice. You still have the choice to do what you want with it.
It's not just this idea about other people judging you, it's literally the idea that what you are is changed by this process of creation. So this is almost like the death of the ego, the death of the self. So your own identity has almost been completely obliterated or transformed, cut to pieces. So this thing that's dying here, it is you, but it's not you that you are now, it's the you that you were. So you're looking down at yourself, bleeding on the floor, and it's like, well, yeah. There's an attachment there, but it's an attachment that's fading, it's disappearing into the past because you're becoming something new.
I also think the thought some cards are some homemade sorrow, because, I mean, also with the 10, you actually only need one weapon to kill somebody, you don't need 10.
Yeah.
And it's all this intellectual, what could happen, oh, what have I done wrong? And you are making yourself a little fussy with all your thoughts. Also the 8, I mean, she can actually walk away. 9, oh, nightmares, what might happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of the angst from this particular journey is from this idea of recreation and how we wrestle with the consequences of creation as an extension of identity, will, and ideal. And I mentioned this thing about existentialism and being compelled to choose, being compelled to make these choices. And yet this is also a wonderful thing, celebrating our capacity to change, create, and choose. Compelled to choose, we can embrace it or fear it, and as we bid farewell to past relationships, we usher in the potential for new ones and exciting possibilities. Also in this microcosm of creation, we can taste the divine macrocosmic creation. Is everyone familiar with the ideas of microcosms and macrocosms? Yeah. Perhaps there's some illuminating comparison here with a deity acquiring identity through their act of creation, or in more literal terms, the nature of an ideal, like a god or love or whatever, can be understood through the behaviours it commands. Someone follow that? It's more of a little throwaway side thing, this idea that you can't necessarily understand yourself except maybe by what you do. Or I can imagine a god there almost not knowing what kind of god it was until it acted. And then it sees what it does and goes, oh, that must be the kind of god I am. So it's kind of a bizarre thing that you maybe don't know yourself until you kind of see yourself reflected back in your work.
Do you see those swords as really working with the ego?
What do you think they work with?
Well, I mean, like, confronting your ego in a sense?
I think it's part of it.
Yeah.
I think it has to be. I can come to that in a bit.
Okay.
Okay. Should I write that one down? I'll ask me that in a sec. Yeah. Okay, so any questions or answers?
I thought what was interesting was the analogy you made about having children and the act of creation. And like number 10, we realise that is an extension of ourselves. And then once you have children, for quite a long time, until they go to university and leave home, you're actually defined as somebody's mother. You know, your identity, yourself. I mean, you may not lose it, but a lot of people don't see you that way. You know, you get seen as, and that's what you say there, our identity falls beneath the blaze of our intellect and what we've created. And that's often the case, is you get viewed as someone's mum rather than...
I know my mum's always been my mum. I've never really thought of her as anything else.
And when sometimes you can actually feel that that's just who you are. You know, that you've lost yourself somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
You get it back later, but for a while it's sort of not there anymore.
Sometimes you can also lose yourself permanently.
Not planning on doing that, but...
No, me neither.
So, we've been through a destructive journey, and we've been through a creative journey. And I think every act of creation can be seen as being bound up with destruction and vice versa, because the new and the old cannot coexist. So I can't help but wonder, is there an alternative metaphor that could emphasize this? The powerful symbol of the double-edged sword does indeed lend itself to a light and a shadow aspect, but instinct tells me to look again. So sort of go on this last final journey at the moment. Is the idea of the sword as a key. And I was thinking of the narrative of something like Pandora's box, maybe. So there's a box and what's inside it. You know,
Lots of trouble.
okay, so number one, we see the potential inside the box. So maybe this is like curiosity almost, perhaps, in a sense. What's in the box? Don't know. Then we consider the possibility of opening it. So maybe this is the point where you would choose the key for the lock. And that's what's inside it. And then 3, turning the key and opening the box so everything changes. From Pandora's box, blah, something comes out. Kind of a distressing period if it's all nasty. Maybe just shocking, surprising. And 4, we look inside the box. Introspection. Now, the swords keep the peace, we are reflecting and meditating. Move on to the 5th. We realise the act once done cannot be undone. Poor old Pandora. The plagues are loose and beyond our recognition to rescind. Everyone is familiar with the story of Pandora?
Yes.
Famous one, that's what I check. Yeah. Good. And 6, we understand the changes we have made real. Now, the 7, we find ourselves getting pulled in by the weight of our emotions. So this is again emphasizing this idea that emotions would in some sense be dominant over reason in this situation. So reason, when it's doing what it's supposed to do, when it's unclouded and allowed to work properly, it does its job. But when emotion clouds reason, then we get deception creeping in. So we find ourselves trapped by our emotions. So we suddenly fall into this box. We open this box and we fall inside it. Okay, and we try to get out. At this point, we're kind of physically, battering away at the walls or whatever. We're struggling with the limitations of our intellect and our self-imposed ideals. So we've literally put ourselves in a box, and we're trying to get out of the box, but the box is something we chose to be in. So it's kind of a bizarre situation we put ourselves in. And reality is, in this sense, dominating our reason, so we get frustrated in this situation. And 9, we panic. We start beating against the walls with our fists. Reason now has gone out the door, and impulse, instinct is taking over. We're just desperate now. Desperation coming in, completely instinctive. And the 10, well, at the end of that journey, we were in a box. Or rather, if we were in a box before, we were in a new box. We've just gone from one box into another box. So we're still in a box. But our prison is now our new home with fresh keyholes and boxes to explore. At this point, the idea I'm using this idea of a box because there's a sense in which language is like a box, and all the ideals and concepts that we have in our lives, they're kind of a box. And we live in this box, and the box is full of meaning. It bleeds, it breathes, it's full of our emotions, it channels all of these things. But it's still a box. It's kind of like we can't get away from that. We're gonna always be like this. I remember a story when I was younger, someone said something like, they were really, really upset one day when they realised that nothing was real except in their heads, and they felt so alone that day because they suddenly realised they were trapped in their minds. And when you see something, you don't actually see the real thing, you're just seeing the image in your head. This is what I mean by the box. You are in this kind of perceptual, self-perception of the world, and that's all you have. On the positive side, that's everything that you have.
Sorry, just a quick question. Do you think that's the reason why the sword suit is seen so negatively? Because it's about the box?
Well, yeah, but...
In a sense.
Yeah, but the thing what I'm trying to bring out is the fact that though it's a box, it's not... Okay, maybe it's like a garden frame, like when you have plants growing up the borders and the trellises. So the box, the words, the language, is like the framework that you would need for that to flourish. It's like without a word, it's hard to get that meaning. And you've got raw sensation, but in order to craft meaning out of that, you kind of have to carve it up and carve these channels which flow around. This is me.
Since it's very intellectual, mental sort of dimension that you're in, box or not, wouldn't that be in a sense constricting itself? Because we overthink. We all do.
Yeah.
we overthink, we overreact, overthought.